Assalamu alaikum. All the brothers are requested to come closer. We're going to be starting our final session of Fiqh of Halal and Haram. Also, if you have not already done so, please take the survey outside, provide your feedback regarding the itikaf program that was held this year. Through your feedback, we're able to improve the program, inshallah, for next year.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده أما بعد. Today inshallah we'll complete our sessions with chapter 9 regarding the masjid and Islamic literature. Just some rulings and guidelines regarding the sanctity of masajid as well as Islamic literature and more specifically what to do with Islamic literature that's gotten old, how to dispose of it, and other guidelines regarding it. So again, this is chapter 9 in the text. I'll just quickly read through the first part. This chapter discusses important etiquette and rulings associated with the masjid, its sanctity and its resources. Furthermore, it explains the etiquette related to Islamic literature, including the Quran, as well as rulings pertaining to its proper disposal. If we have time at the end, I've added in a brief section regarding masajid and the signs of the hour. There are quite a number of ahadith regarding masajid and the condition of masajid from being amongst the signs of the hour, certain things that will take place. And so if we have time at the end of today's session, inshallah, I'll go through those slides. The etiquette of the masjid. And before we read regarding the etiquette of the masjid as well as certain adab or etiquettes regarding the Quran, basically the Quran, a few ayat from the Quran that talk about etiquette and adab. A person may say these specific forms of respect aren't found in the Quran, or specific forms of respect not found from the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. But generally there are ayat in the Quran which indicate towards a person having respect and proper etiquette with the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being from the taqwa of a person's heart. So this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَمَن يُعَذِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Whoever honors the symbols of Allah, from amongst the symbols of Allah, the houses of Allah, the books of Allah, the people of Allah, Ahlullah. These are all symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And other creation as well, anything that can be taken as a symbol of Allah. Whoever honors, respects, and reveres it, فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Then this is from the consciousness of their heart, from the piety of their heart, that a person respects it. This is from the taqwa, from their taqwa. In another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن يُعَذِّمْ حُرُمَاتِ اللَّهِ فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِ. A person who venerates the sacred things of God, of Allah, it shall be better for him. خَيْرٌ لَهُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِ. So it's better for this person for them to have this respect and honor for these signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that's why when it comes to etiquette, there's no halal and haram regarding it. There's no dalil qat'i or definitive text regarding it. But there is speculative text. There's other indicative ayat in the Quran that talk about specific etiquettes. And so that's why it's important for us to have this etiquette, be aware of this etiquette. So in the first section here, etiquette of the masjid, the author writes, it is makruh to stretch one's legs towards the qibla. Again, it's not haram, because it's not defined or proven through definitive text. But it is something which is disliked just because it is out of etiquette that a person wouldn't do such a thing towards the house of Allah. It is also against etiquette to pass gas in the masjid, as well as to eat and sleep for the one who is not in i'tikaf. So if you're not in i'tikaf, for a person to sleep or to use the masjid as means of rest for someone that's not in i'tikaf, then this would be something which is disliked. Now, technically, every time you enter the masjid, you can make a niyyah of i'tikaf. A person, every time that comes into the masjid, can make the niyyah or the intention of making i'tikaf. And so if a person does, for example, spend a good amount of time in the masjid, it doesn't have to be the sunnah i'tikaf of 10 days. Any time, and it could be outside of the month of Ramadan as well. If you make the niyyah of i'tikaf, then these things, to eat, sleep, and rest in the masjid would be permissible. It is not permissible to enter the masjid in the state of major ritual impurity, although one may enter in a state of minor ritual impurity. Minor ritual impurity is if you don't have wudu. You can enter the masjid without wudu, technically. But for a person to enter the masjid in a major state of impurity, which would be if a person has had intercourse or in some way, shape, or form has ejaculated, this has put them in a major state of impurity. And for them to become pure, they would then have to take a ghusl or a shower, and then they can enter the masjid. So for a person that is in a major state of impurity, and for women it is also, again, after intercourse or in the state of menstruation, they would not be allowed, or they're not allowed to enter the masjid. To enter the masjid with shoes is makruh. We know in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talked to Musa alayhi salatu salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala advised Musa alayhi salatu salam before coming to the sacred valley, فَخْلَعْنَا عَلَيْكَ, take off your shoes. And again, just logically, there's obviously impurity on our shoes, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. There's impurities on our shoes, so it would be impermissible for a person to walk into the masjid with their shoes on. It would be highly disliked. As well as to engage in worldly affairs therein is also something which is makruh or disliked. If a person builds a masjid in an uninhabited area where people do not normally pass, then this will not constitute as a masjid. It is mustahab to designate an area in one's home as a musalla, as a place of worship. Now, there's a difference between a masjid and a musalla. And this is a technical difference that scholars have written about. And the implications of this are something that we find, and specifically here now in i'tikaf, you may have seen as well. For example, if a person that is in i'tikaf cannot leave the masjid, what does that technically mean? What is included in the masjid? What's outside of the masjid? And so there is a difference between a musalla, which is just a prayer area, and a masjid, which fulfills all the requirements of what a masjid is. And so some of the issues that come up in this conversation of whether it's a masjid or a musalla, especially here in the States, in the West, where Muslims have to go through the struggle of finding a place of worship and sometimes not being full owners of it, sometimes renting out storefronts. What's the technical definition of that space? Is it a masjid or a musalla? There's a difference. Some of the issues that come about, ownership versus endowment. Masjids are endowed, are given for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're waqf lillahi ta'ala. No one technically owns them. It's something that is for Allah. And so if a storefront is rented out, it's not waqf lillahi ta'ala. It's not for Allah because it's rented. It's not owned by the masjid or the organization. So this does not fulfill the requirements of a masjid. It would be deemed technically a musalla. Also, implications of this regarding the prohibited actions within the masjid. For example, business transactions are not allowed in the masjid. People that are in a major state of impurity, not allowed in the masjid. Talking about worldly affairs is makruh tahrimi in the masjid. So even in masajid that are in a building on their own, that are an endowment for someone to talk about worldly affairs, say in the lobby or in the office, or to sell and buy outside of the prayer area, you would have to designate that as not a part of the technical masjid. And this issue comes up quite often in other masajid. I remember in Virginia there was a masjid that wanted to put in vending machines, and they had not specified which area of the building was masjid which area of the masjid, which area of the building wasn't masjid. And so there was an issue regarding the vending machine. You can't buy and sell in the masjid. So that's when they stipulated, okay, this part of the building is masjid, this part of the building isn't masjid, and they then had vending machines put there. And so the sanctity of that area that is technically regarded a masjid will then fulfill all of the requirements of what a masjid is. Issues of purity, we talked about not being able to enter the masjid in a state of major ritual impurity, or for women in a state of menstruation. Now, if there's no specification in the building that this is the technical masjid, then sisters may feel uncomfortable coming to the masjid in a state of major ritual impurity, because how can they enter the masjid in this state? It's impermissible. So what's important is that the building or the masjid have a technical space, which is the masjid. And so sisters can still, for example, attend the masjid in the days when they are in a state of major ritual impurity, still attend gatherings, but be outside of the technical masjid. Bathrooms is also an issue. A masjid does not have any najasa in it. And so the technical space of the masjid, not only that floor, but below it and above it, till the seven heavens, is all considered masjid. And so if there's najasa in it, this is something which goes against the sanctity of the masjid. And so again, the issue with storefronts. Many times in larger cities, the storefront will have an apartment building on top of it, where not only there are bathrooms, but there is also other things that are taking place which go against the sanctity of a masjid, hence not fulfilling the requirements of what a technical masjid is. Then there's the issue of i'tikaf. I'tikaf is only allowed in a masjid, and then we know the general rewards of praying salah in a masjid, different from just praying in jama'ah at home or in another place of worship. So there's a technical difference between a masjid and a musalla, and there's a paper written by Mufti Abdurrahman ibn Yusuf Mangera, and you can, just for your further reading, look up this paper online. But just a quick quote from his article. He says, in the case of large Islamic centers today, which include a prayer hall, the prayer hall should be considered the Shari'i masjid, the technical masjid, if it has been intended and designated as such. However, the adjacent rooms, such as the lobby, dining hall, children's room, gymnasium, offices, would be considered as supplementary or extensions of the masjid, and hence not part of the technical Shari'i masjid area, even though they would be part of the endowment or the waqf, not returnable to anyone's ownership. But the ruling would be different for the two, as we highlight below. And so he goes on to further explain the difference between a masjid and a musalla. So this is something which is important and something that has implications in today's day and age. The next paragraph has to do with the holiest masajid. We know the Prophet ﷺ said, do not undertake any journey to visit any masjid except for these three: my masjid, Masjidi Hada, and the Kaaba in Mecca, and Masjid al-Aqsa. Now, from the apparent wording of the hadith, a person may say, well, that means we can't specifically visit any other masjids. No. What's intended here is that in any other masjid, you will not find the reward that's specified for these three masajid. The hadith reported by Imam Bayhaqi, a prayer in Mecca is worth 100,000. Sorry for the typo there. A prayer in my masjid is worth 1,000. And a prayer in Masjid al-Aqsa is worth 500 times more reward than anywhere else. So in these three specific masajid, there are specific rewards. And then for a person, the author then writes, after Masjid, Mecca, Medina, and Masjid al-Aqsa, it would for a person be the most rewarding masjid would then be Masjid al-Jami'. Masjid al-Jami' is the masjid which is the largest masjid in the area. And in olden times, there would be this concept where there are many different smaller masajid. Every street would have its own masjid. But when it came for Jumu'ah or for Eid, all of the people would then go to Masjid al-Jami', which would be the biggest masjid. And so the other masajid would sometimes close or not have that prayer performed in that masjid. So the Masjid al-Jami' is something that we see in Mecca and Medina, for example, where other masajid in the area may not have the Jumu'ah prayer. Everyone then attends the masjid. And so the larger masjid, this was a concept That's not so much found in today's day and age, though in some communities you will see this concept. No, it's 100,000. I mentioned this is just a typo. Yeah, it's a typo. So these three masjids would be the holiest, then a person's jami' masjid, then their local community masjid, followed by one's own street masjid, and then finally the masjid in their home or the prayer area in their home. If the masjid is packed, then one may ask a sitting person to move from his spot in order to make room to pray. Due to lack of space in the masjid, people may also pray on the roof. Like I mentioned, above and below is all considered masjid, hence a person may pray on the roof. The sanctity of the masjid. So these are just some rules and guidelines regarding the etiquette or the adab of a masjid. Number one, to greet the congregants if they are not busy in ibadah. So if you come into the masjid and people are praying, say it's time for sunnah of Jumu'ah, or everyone's reciting Quran, then you don't say salam. But if people are waiting for salah and people are sitting around, then it is the etiquette to greet the congregants and say assalamu alaikum. Number two, tahiyyat al-masjid, to pray the 2 rak'ah of prayer. There's a difference of opinion amongst the schools of thought regarding the ruling of tahiyyat al-masjid. For example, in other schools of thought, a person cannot sit until they pray these 2 rak'ah of Tahiyatul Masjid. And the reason for this is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which the Prophet ﷺ encourages and mentions, do not sit until you've prayed 2 rak'ah or 2 units of this prayer, Tahiyatul Masjid, the prayer of being entered or being welcomed into the masjid. Other schools according to some schools of thought, it is wajib, obligatory. Before you sit, you come into the masjid, you pray 2 rak'ah of Tahiyatul Masjid. In the Hanafi school of thought, it's something which is rewarding in a sunnah, but not something which is wajib. So a person should pray this. Of course, there are rewards in praying the Tahiyatul Masjid. Number 3, refrain from buying and selling. There's actually a hadith that we'll go over. In this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ mentions, whoever hears someone announcing in the masjid about something that's been lost, making an announcement regarding something that's lost, the Prophet ﷺ says, tell him, may Allah not return to you that which you lost. For verily masjids haven't been built for that. And so the spirit behind this is not telling the person, I hope what you lost, you'll never find it again. That's not the spirit. The spirit of the hadith is just warning against making announcements in the masjid that don't have to do with the deen of Islam, which don't have to do with da'wah generally. So if the announcement, and scholars, they further explain this hadith. They say if something's been lost in the masjid, then it would be permissible to talk about it. If someone lost their child in the masjid, or their keys in the masjid, or their phone in the masjid, then it would be permissible. But to talk about things that are outside of the masjid, a person lost something, or their car was stolen in the next town over, that would be impermissible. The announcements of the masjid and what takes place in the masjid directly has to be connected to the dhikr of Allah, to ibadat, and to things that go on in the masjid. So to announce for lost belongings is against the etiquette of the masjid. To refrain from buying and selling is against the etiquettes of the masjid. Number 4, to not unsheath one's sword. Now, of course, this has to do with safety. Today's day and age, if you're carrying, the brothers that come into the masjid and empty their pockets before they pray. I'm talking about, like, they come in and they stand in saf, and then they take out their phone, and then their wallet, and then their keys, and then their glasses, and they dump everything in front of them before they pray, which is permissible. It can be sometimes distracting. If you're carrying, don't take out your gun and put that on the floor as well. That's what it means. Don't unsheath, it's against the etiquettes to do that. Of course, you shouldn't be carrying. Many masjids have rules against that, but if the masjid's given you permission, then of course you could carry. But again, don't take, that's just against safety. Number 6, not to raise one's voice except with the dhikr of Allah. So there shouldn't be raised voices in the masjid. Number 7, to avoid engaging in worldly conversations. Again, this is makruh tahrimi, that we sit in the masjid and talk about, for example, politics or sports and things of this nature. Number 8, not to cut through the sufuf. Meaning, if you're late for Jumu'ah, accept the fact you're late and sit where there's space in the back. Don't cut through all of the sufuf and then inconvenience other people, and then where there's no space, basically sit in someone's lap because you want the reward of the first saf. If you want the reward of the first saf, then come early. So to cut through the sufuf is against the etiquette of the masjid. Of course, now if there is space, for example, and you can easily get to the front without inconveniencing anyone, then it would be permissible. Refraining from any argumentation from the signs of the Day of Judgment is that there will be raised voices in the masjid. Number 10, to make room for others in the saf. Number 11, to be cautious of crossing in front of a praying person. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, if a person knew the punishment for crossing in front of a person, then they would wait for 40. That's what the hadith says, 40. The narrator of the hadith says, I don't remember if it was 40 hours, 40 days, or 40 months, how long a person would actually wait before crossing them. So that's something we should be cautious of. Scholars do, though, give permission in a very large masjid where it would be completely impossible to leave without crossing multiple people. Number 12, not spitting in the masjid. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the masjids weren't beautifully decorated or didn't have carpet like we have today, and so sometimes spitting was normal for them. And so there are ahadith in which the Prophet ﷺ discourages spitting in the masjid altogether, and then specifically in the direction of the qibla. So of course in today's day and age, that's not something you would do in the masjid. Number 13, not to crack the knuckles. This is also something which is disliked because of its distraction and also because it has this effect. If one person cracks their knuckles and the next person cracks their knuckles and then it just goes on. It's contagious, kind of like yawning. Number 14, safeguarding the masjid from impurities. So this includes all types of for example, in today's day and age, children walking around with diapers, it would be permissible for children to be in the masjid, but if there's fear of a leaking diaper, then you do not make qiyas on the hadith where the man urinated in the masjid and it was okay. Don't equate the two. The man that urinated in the masjid had already started, and the Prophet ﷺ said, don't stop him, because he's already started. And then they went and cleaned up afterwards. This doesn't mean that if there are impurities in the masjid, you let it go. It's completely two different scenarios. And so this is something that we should be careful about, is safeguarding the masjid from impurities. And number 15, there should be an abundance of dhikr. That's the reason the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have been built, for us to remember Allah. And that's why also, again, the stipulation of what part of the masjid is actually masjid. In today's day and age, with large Islamic centers, of course there's community centers, there's gyms, there's different parts of the building. There should always be a designated area where only the remembrance of Allah is taking place, where it's quiet to remember Allah, recite Quran, make dhikr, because that's why the masajid have been built. So those are just some etiquettes regarding the masjid. Masjid resources, it is not permissible to remove a mushaf from the masjid, whether to take home for reading or to another masjid. Additionally, one may not waste masjid resources or use it for one's personal use. Just like the masjid is an endowment, is waqf lillahi ta'ala, many times you'll find Qur'ans that are also waqf lillahi ta'ala. If it says do not remove, or it says this has been endowed to Allah, in Saudi Arabia they have a program where you can pay money to have Qur'ans printed, and then they are put in the masjid or in different masajid throughout the world where they are now part of the masjid endowment. You can't remove that Qur'an. Students for memorizing Qur'an can use the Qur'an while in the masjid but cannot take it home. This Qur'an is specifically for the masjid use and not personal use. And then Islamic literature, we'll talk about how a person can properly, respectfully dispose of Islamic literature. For old Qur'ans, there are, and this is what's been written in books of fiqh, the best way, ideally what a person wants to do, if there is an old Qur'an, you cannot read out of it anymore and it's falling apart, then the best way would be to wrap it up in a pure piece of cloth and bury it in a respectful place, respectfully in a place where people normally do not walk. In some place far out where people don't walk, you can dig up and bury the Qur'an in the ground while it's already protected and wrapped in a peaceful and a pure cloth. In cold climate countries, one may dig a shik grave, but a slab should be placed first and over it the soil. What this means is, and I think on the next slide I'll show you, there's two types of graves. There's the lahad grave and the shik grave, and you'll find this in books of fiqh. And what this means is there's sometimes we think of it, maybe here in the States as well, a grave is just something that goes straight down 6 feet, and then you cover the body and you throw the soil on top. In the Islamic tradition, what we find from the practice of the Sunnah and the Sahaba is that they would dig down and then create a niche where the body would be placed in that niche and then covered before throwing dirt on top. And so basically what they're saying here is that either you can, preferably it should be in a lahad grave, and if not in a lahad type of grave, then a shiq grave, and I'll show you the difference. It's basically the same thing. If a person cannot do this, then fastening the Quran with a heavy object like a stone, and then placing it respectfully in flowing water, this is also a way of discarding of an old Quran. And if one is unable, again typo, if one is unable to implement the above two methods, if one is able to implement the above two methods, it would not be permitted to burn the copy of the Quran. You are only permitted to burn the copy of the Quran if the above two methods is not available. If the above two methods are difficult to carry out, then one may burn the Quran and bury or drown the resulting ash. So ideally you don't want to burn the Quran. You can either bury it or place it in flowing water. And if that's not possible for whatever reason, then a person may burn the Quran. This is the lahad grave. So if a person, you dig down straight and then create a small niche where the body is placed, and then you place a slab over the body or whatever you are burying before filling it with sand. This also helped in facing the body towards the Qibla. It was also the more respectful way to bury someone and not having dirt thrown directly upon them. And then the shiq grave would be the same thing, except it's where the ground cannot hold up to create a niche like in the lahad grave. You will create a small crevice at the bottom of the grave, and then again, you see how something is laid on top before you throw dirt on it. So ideally, for the Quran, as well as for people, lahad grave is what is preferred. Again, why? Because the body is put in the niche and dirt is not thrown directly on top. But the shiq grave is also permissible in cases where the earth won't hold up on the niche, when the soil is sometimes too moist or not able to hold up. That's the difference between the lahad and the shiq grave. In regards to old Islamic literature, which is a little different, a person, if it's possible, you can, and most ideally, you want to cross out the names of Allah or the names of the Anbiya alayhi salatu wassalam. So if there's just a few, maybe it's just a Bismillah on the paper, maybe it's just the name of Allah in a few places, best to cross it out before you start disposing of it. And secondly, then you can either bury it, place it in flowing water, or shred it. And if you're going to shred it, you need to shred it until the letters are not readable altogether. The words should not be readable. Hence, the best way would be for the micro-cut shredders and not the cross-cut or the other types of shredders where the whole line, sometimes there's shredders that just shreds the whole line across, and so you can still read the ayah or Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim completely. You want it to be micro-cut so you can't read the word. So this would be old Islamic literature, the best way to dispose of it. You can read the remainder of this section on Islamic literature. Again, it mentions that it's makruh to stretch your feet towards a mushaf of the Quran, just like it would be makruh or disliked to stretch your feet towards the Qibla. And there's some other etiquettes mentioned as well. With the remaining time, I would like to just mention a few signs of the Day of Judgment that specifically have to do with the masajid, just to create an awareness on our behalf, as well as for us to remember and to prepare for the ending of times, as the Prophet ﷺ has warned us and given us many ahadith encouraging the preparation for us, of course, of the afterlife. And with so many signs of the Day of Judgment being apparent in our times, it's important for us to at least learn about them. Related to the masjid, we find ahadith regarding salat with jama'ah, something that would be a loss, or there would be a loss of numbers regarding the salat with jama'ah. This is mentioned in ahadith. Also, there's ahadith regarding the competition between masajid from amongst the signs of the Day of Judgment. Thirdly, unnecessary adornment or primarily prioritizing adornment of the masjid over the actions of the masjid. This is also from amongst the signs of the Day of Judgment. Fourthly, raising of voices in the masjid from amongst the signs of the Day of Judgment. And fifthly, using the masjid as a somewhere to visit, a place where tourists will visit and take pictures, or use the masjid as a passageway instead of as a place of ibadah. These are all ahadith that have been mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ regarding the ending of times. Regarding salah with jama'ah, in a hadith reported by Ali radiallahu anhu, a man once asked Ali radiallahu anhu, can you tell us about the signs of Dajjal? And so Ali radiallahu anhu says, besides that, let me tell you some of the signs of the Dajjal. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ali radiallahu anhu, in that hadith, he mentioned that one of the things that would be from amongst the signs of the Day of Judgment is that salah with jama'ah would die out. And this is something which is a modern phenomenon. Jazakullahu Khairun. This is something which is a modern phenomena where there is close to, I can't put numbers on it, but very few people that actually pray their salah in congregation in the masjid. And the reason for this, and why I say it's a modern phenomenon, is because in past times when there were Islamic where there was an Islamic Khilafah, all the Muslims would be basically mandated to pray their salah in the masjid. And so if a person wasn't praying salah in the masjid with jama'ah, there would be protocol for him. And there would be time they would have him come in front of a judge and speak about why he isn't attending the masjid. There would even be sometimes jail and things of this nature for a person who has left praying salah with jama'ah. And in the last 100 or few hundred years or so, this is a phenomena that's gone away. So the Muslims were at one time forced, in a sense, to pray their salah with congregation. In today's day and age, even in Islamic countries, there's no enforcement of people praying their salah in the masjid. Hence you'll find a deficiency regarding this. And this is from amongst the signs that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, that salah would die out. Some scholars say this is a specific to spirituality of salah, where salah will just become physical actions of up and down, the prostration and ruku', and no spirit involved. Other scholars say this has to do with the actual praying of salah altogether in jama'ah. So this is from amongst the signs of the Day of Judgment. And in this hadith reported by Imam Ahmad, the Prophet ﷺ mentions that the knots of Islam will be undone one by one. And each time a knot is undone, the next one will be grasped. And what's meant by this is, imagine if you have a rope that has many knots on it, and the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ is holding on to this rope. And every time a knot is undone, they'll hold on to the next thing, but that will also be undone. And slowly but surely, all of these knots, which are actually parts of Islam, will slowly be undone. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, the first to be undone will be ruling. And what this means is taking the way we live, our guidelines and our commandments from the Quran, from the Sunnah, from the Fiqh of scholars. This will be the first thing that will go. People will not care about what the Quran says regarding rules of our lives, what Fiqh says regarding rulings of our life. And the last that will be undone will be the prayer, meaning people will leave salah altogether. So this is from amongst the signs of the Day of Judgment. Also, from amongst the signs of the Day of Judgment in regards to masajid, the Prophet ﷺ mentions, لا تقوم الساعة حتى يتباهى الناس في المساجد. The hour will not begin until people compete in the building of masjids. Who has the most beautiful masjid? Who has the most expensive things in the masjid? Etc., etc. And to have many masajid isn't a bad thing, as long as the masajid are needed. What I mean by this is, like we saw on the night of Khatm al-Quran, many masjids in the area had their Khatm al-Quran on the same night, and all of them were packed, which showed that there is a need for so many masjids in one area or in one locality. But what's meant by the hadith is that there is a competition of masjids, just building a masjid for the sake of it, for this competition, and there not being a need for it. Or, for example, building masajid only for certain ethnicities. And you'll find this, unfortunately, in some parts of the world, where in maybe a square, just a few miles, there are many masajid, and all of them are either not filling up even in the month of Ramadan. And sometimes they're only built for certain ethnicities. There's a group of people from a certain ethnicity or background, so they will build a masjid. And so this goes against the etiquette or the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and adds to this sign of our living out right in front of our very eyes. The fourth thing has to do with adornments of the masjid. The Prophet ﷺ mentions, hadith reported by Imam Abu Dawood, إِذَا زَوَّقْتُمْ مَسَاجِدَكُمْ وَحُلِّيتُمْ مَصَاحِفَكُمْ فَالدِّمَارُ عَلَيْكُمْ. This hadith reported by in the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba. He mentions, if you adorn your masjids and decorate your mushafs, then you are doomed. Now this, again, doesn't mean that the adornment of masjids is a bad thing. It is only something which is looked down upon, and from amongst the signs of the masjid, if the other activities, the primary activities of the masjid aren't taking place. Meaning there is no activities going on which help the guidance of the people, and the priority is just to beautify the masjid. This would be the spirit of the hadith. In one hadith reported by Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he says that the Prophet ﷺ said, your masajid will be built up beautifully, وَهِيَ خَرَابٌ مِنَ الْهُدَى, and they will be empty from guidance. Which means that the priority of the masjid will be to be adorned, be beautiful, and they will be empty from guidance, meaning there will be no focus on the guidance or on the guidance of the community. And so to decorate the masajid isn't a bad thing. It's actually something which is rewarding. But if you're only focusing on the adornment of the masjid, then this is something which is against the spirit of the masajid, and something which is a sign from the Day of Judgment. For example, a person may ask or may say, you see, for example, our Masjid Dar Salam, it's beautifully adorned. But this wouldn't fall into this category. Why? Because there are so many programs that take place for the guidance of the community, and it's one after the other. Meaning after i'tikaf, there will be the summer programs, the Deen intensive, the Arabic intensive, the Hifz, summer Hifz, and then the school year will start with the full-time Hifz program, the Alim class, and then winter intensive and the winter conference, and it never ends. It never ends, and it's something which is something beautiful to see. And also, there's a story of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah, who was known as the fifth Khalifa of Islam. He was also of this opinion that masjids shouldn't be adorned. And so in his rule, once he visited Syria and he saw the Umayyi masjid was beautifully adorned. And as he was kind of looking at it and thinking about it, and he thought to himself, well, so much has gone into adorning this masjid. As he's thinking this, there are two non-Muslims that are also in the masjid, and they say, wow, subhanAllah, look at the building and the structure of the Muslims and how well organized they are and how beautiful Islam is. And Umar bin Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah, he says, as I'm thinking this happens in front of me, and this was a sign from Allah that this is actually something which is good for Islam, that our masjids are built beautifully and are beautiful structures that invite towards Islam, become a means of da'wah. And so here as well, Mufti Minhaj was telling me a few months ago that this maybe happened many years or sometime a while ago. There is an imam of a masjid which is about an hour away. And he called and told Mufti Minhaj that there was a sister that accepted Islam in his masjid about an hour away. And when he asked her, what was it that led you to accept Islam? She mentioned specifically, I was driving down North Avenue and I saw a beautiful mosque. And at seeing the mosque, it brought a sense of guidance, a sense of hidayah, a sense of yearning for Islam into my heart, and she ended up accepting Islam. So to have masjids built beautifully isn't something which is looked down upon, but it's if only the adornment of the masjid is priority and the guidance of the community is not prioritized, that is when it is something looked down upon. And the last thing which we find from amongst the signs of the Day of Judgment regarding masajid, the Prophet ﷺ mentions, hadith reported by Imam Tirmidhi, the hour will come when voices are raised in the masajid. When masajid, the sanctity of the masjid is lost and voices are raised, whether it's through infighting, whether it's through debates, whether it's through just raising of the voices in the masjid. When the sanctity of the masjid is lost, then the hour will be upon us. And so there are many signs of the Day of Judgment, and specifically these that have to do with masajid. I just wanted to share them because we are going over the chapter of masajid. as followers of the Prophet ﷺ, we should try our best to become means of guidance in our communities, be means of happiness and convenience and joy and in learning for our communities and saving our masajid from any type of degradation, any type of going down the wrong path. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq, to accept our sitting here and learning the few issues of fiqh that we've gone over. We went over, I believe, almost all of the chapters besides 3, if I'm not mistaken, chapter 2, which was hunting, and then chapter 10 and 11. And again, this was because of a shortage of time. This is actually one of the courses we teach in the Tafhim Weekend Academy. So if anyone is interested, this is from just an example of what a weekend course would look like. It's spread out over about 14 or 15 weeks. Once a week, there's 6 classes that are offered, and you can look at the curriculum online, inshallah. Just as, because it's our last session together, I'd like to thank all of you for your time and your effort in attending the session. I would also like to ask forgiveness for any shortcoming on my part. If I said or did anything which offended anyone, please forgive me. If there was anything good that I said, it came from the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If there was anything wrong and incorrect, it came from my shortcomings. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our sitting here and to make it a means of weight on our scale of good deeds, inshallah. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Lastly, the one thing I hope that this session has brought across, and we see in that hadith that mentions the knots of Islam will be undone, the first thing that will be the rulings of Islam. In today's day and age, fiqh gets a very bad rep. Sometimes there's this thought that scholars don't know what they're really doing, they're just putting together rules, but behind it there's actually a system and there's guidelines and there's principles, and it's something that scholars study for many, many years before actually coming to the state where they make an ijtihad or put out a ruling. And so I hope at least that point has been put across, that there's more that goes into fiqh than the spectrum that we see. For us, it's made easy, and we see the spectrum of what's fard and what's wajib and what's sunnah and what's mustahab and what's mubah and makruh and haram. It looks and it's been made easy, but sometimes we forget about the effort that goes in behind it. So I hope at least that this has put some importance of fiqh into our lives and hopefully has encouraged us to try and learn more about our deen. We learn basic fiqh of rulings, basic fiqh of aqidah in Sunday schools as we grow up, but to learn, to continue learning is from amongst the major blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bless a person with. As the hadith mentions, مَنْ يُرِيدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. If Allah wants or intends good for someone, Allah gives them the understanding of deen. And that's what we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, the understanding of deen. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma ya arhamar rahimin, ya akram al-akramin, ya dhal jalali wal-ikram. يا حنان يا منان يا غافر الذنب وقابل التوب شديد العقاب ذا الطول لا إله إلا هو إليه المصير اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات لا إله إلا الله الحليم الكريم سبحان الله رب العرش العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين نسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والغنيمة من كل بر والسلامة من كل إثم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا دينا إلا قضيته ولا مريضا إلا شفيته ولا حاجة هي لك رضا إلا قضيتها ويسرتها يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم اشف مرضانا ومرضى المسلمين يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث اصلح لنا شأننا كله ولا تكلنا إلى أنفسنا طرفة عين ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين والحمد لله رب العالمين جزاكم الله خير.